how Taylor Swift used metaphors to express love, heartbreak, growth, and identity using conceptual metaphor theory or CMT. CMT, proposed by Lakoff and Johnson, explained that metaphors shape how we think and understand abstract ideas through familiar experiences. For example, saying love is a journey. Through qualitative content analysis, the study finds recurring metaphors like love is a journey and relationships as battles, showing how Taylor Swift's lyrics connect personal emotion with universal human experience. Overall, her metaphors enhance emotional depth and reveal how language, cognition, and culture interact in popular music. A vital role in how people think and communicate. They allowed us to express abstract emotion or complex experiences that can't always be described literally. In everyday life, and especially in songwriting, metaphors help create vivid mental image and emotional depth. In context of music, metaphors don't just make lyrics sound beautiful. They help listeners relate to the story being told. Through metaphors, songwriters can turn personal feelings into something that feels universal. Taylor Swift is a perfect example of this. Her lyrics often use metaphors to describe love, heartbreak, self-discovery, and identity in a way that feels deeply personal yet widely understood. For instance, she often portrays love as a journey or emotional pain as a kind of battle, which helps the listener visualize and feel those emotions. This study therefore focuses on understanding how Taylor Swift metaphors work, how they set meaning, guide emotional response, and build the narrative of her songs. By analyzing her lyric across different albums, we can see how her metaphorical style evolves and how it connects individual emotion with broader cultural experiences. Ultimately, this research highlights the strong relationship between language, cognition, and emotion in contemporary popular music. Main objectives. The first objective is to identify and categorize the main metaphors found in Taylor Swift song lyrics based on their conceptual meanings. And the study collects and organizes these different metaphors used in her song using conceptual domains such as love is a journey, emotion is war, and the self is a fragmented entity. By classifying these metaphors, the research aims to show the main themes that appear across her songwriting and build a solid basis for deeper analysis later on. The second objective is to analyze how these metaphors convey meaning and emotion in Taylor Swift's song. This involves studying how metaphors help shape the story within the lyrics, make the song's message clearer, and trigger emotional reactions from listeners. By examining how figurative language works together with narrative elements, the study show how metaphors add both artistic value and emotional depth to her music. The third objective is to explore the mental or cognitive processes behind Taylor Swift's use of metaphors. Based on conceptual metaphors theory or CMT, according to this theory, metaphors are more than just decorative language. They reflect how people understand abstract ideas through concrete experiences. So, this part of study looks at how Taylor Swift metaphor act as mental connection that help listener grasp complex feelings and relate to them more easily. The fourth and final objective is to examine how Taylor Swift's metaphors link her personal stories with shared cultural experiences. Here, the study focuses on how her figurative language not only expresses her individual emotions but also connects to common social and cultural ideas. This shows how her music bridges the gap between personal and universal experiences, allowing people from different backgrounds to find meaning in her lyrics.
I will explain about the literary review. The first theoretical foundation in this research is conceptual metaphor theory, developed by George Lakoff and Mark Jansen in their books Metaphor, released by 2018. Traditionally, people saw metaphor only as poetic or decorative language, something used to beauty words, but Lakoff and Jansen changed that perspective by saying that metaphors are actually a way of thinking, not just a way of speaking. According to this theory, we understand abstract concepts through concrete experiences. For example, when we say, our relationship is going nowhere, we are thinking of love as a journey. There is a path, a directions, and obstacle along the way. Similarly, I'm running out of time. So, how we understand time as a path or time is a resource. In other words, metaphors are a part of how our brains make sense of the world. They shape not only our language but also our emotions, perceptions, and imaginations. That's why this theory is the backbone of the journal semantic analysis of a metaphor in Taylor Swift song lyrics. It helps explain how Taylor Swift uses metaphor to express deep emotional experiences through familiar and relatable image. Now, let's move the previous studies and scholars who have explored metaphor. The first is Kovic 2002, argue that metaphors are grounded in both bodily experiences and cultural backgrounds. For example, the feeling of warmth when being close to someone explains why we associate love with warmth, like saying a warm heart. The second is Gibbs 1994. Focus on how metaphor influence human thoughts and emotions. He explained that metaphor guide our everyday reasonings even when we don't relate it. And number three, in the file of music and lyrics, Jubikowski 2009 studies how listener understanding metaphor in song. He found that when we listen to lyrics, our brain activity interpret the metaphorical meaning. So, listeners are not passive but cognitively engaged. And number four, Nguyen 2013 analyzed Adele's song and discovered that her metaphor of pain, loss, and empowerment make her lyrics emotional, powerful, and relatable to listeners. And the last person's Characteristics 2004 also contributes by showing how metaphor in media and popular culture can shape ideology and public emotion. So, what do these studies have in common? They all show that metaphor connect language, emotions, and culture. They are not just figures of speech, they are cognitive and emotional tools that help us build meaning and share experiences. This background is very important because it provides the theoretical and contextual foundation for analyzing Taylor Swift's song in the journal. Even though Taylor Swift is one of the most famous singer-songwriter in the world, very few academic studies actually analyze her use of metaphor, especially from a semantics or cognitive linguistic perspective. Most previous discussions about her work focus on the storytelling or emotions, but they don't really explain how her metaphor function to create meaning. This journal fills that gap by applying conceptual metaphor theory to her lyrics. Its identity and categories metaphors such as love is a journey, self is a miracle, and relationship is war. The research explored how these metaphors structure the emotion and narrative in Swift song, showing that metaphors help express identity, emotional, and vulnerability. More important, this study argues that metaphor act as a bridge between Taylor Swift's personal storytelling and universal culture experience. When she writes, I'm a miracle, for example, she used a metaphor that reflects and self-awareness, something every listener can relate to, even if situation is different. So, this study doesn't just analyze her artistic style; it shows how metaphor allow personal emotion to become a shared human experience. In short, metaphor makes Taylor Swift's song emotional, powerful, intellectual rich, and universal meaningful.
Okay, so hello everyone, my name is Ilham Hanif, and now I will explain the research methodology section of our journal called A Semantic Analysis of Metaphors in Taylor Swift's Song Lyrics. Okay, so first of all, this research used a qualitative descriptive approach. So this means that the researcher doesn't just focus on numbers or statistics, but rather on describing and interpreting meanings in detail. And so in this study, the aim is to understand how metaphors are used in Taylor Swift's lyrics and why they carry such a strong emotional and narrative effect. So this method allows the researcher to explore the lyrics deeply, identifying hidden meanings and the emotional connections behind the words. Instead of counting how many metaphors appear, the focus is on what those metaphors actually represent. For example, how love, heartbreak, or identity are expressed through figurative language. And so the main theoretical framework that are used here is conceptual metaphor theory, which are proposed by Lakoff and Johnson in 1980. So basically, this theory argues that metaphors are not just only artistic or poetic tools, but actually reflect how humans think and perceive the world. Uh, According to this theory, people often understand abstract ideas through more concrete experiences. For example, when Taylor Swift described love as a journey or a battle, she's mapping into a real-life physical experience like traveling or fighting onto an emotional experience like being in love. So metaphors help us to make sense of complex feelings by connecting them to something familiar. And through this framework also, the research explores how Swift's lyrics use metaphors to communicate emotions and ideas that might be difficult to express literally. So metaphors are essential to shape how listener emotionally and also to experience your music. Okay, so now we're moving on to the data collection part. So the data source for this study comes from the selected song lyrics by Taylor Swift. So the researcher analyzed 5 songs. Each of them are representing a different phase in her musical career. Now, those songs are: first, "Love Story" from the album Fearless, the Taylor's version. 2 is "The Blank Space" from 1989. 3 is "The Archer" from Lover. 4 is "The Mirable" from Folklore. And 5 is "An All Too Well," the 10-minute version from Red, which also Taylor's version. And so these songs were chosen for 3 main reasons. The first is because of their lyrical complexity, meaning that they contain rich and poetic expressions. Second is their thematic richness, so they explore deep and universal emotions such as love, heartbreak, and identity. And the third one is the density of metaphorical language, since all these songs use metaphors very heavily to express emotion and meaning. Also, these songs are representing a different era of Taylor Swift's artistic journey, from like the fairy tale inspired storytelling in Love Story to the emotional self-reflection in Mirrorball and The Archer, and finally to the mature and nostalgic tone in All Too Well. So, the study ensures that the analysis covers a wide range of emotions and also other things. So to summarize these things up, this methodology helps the researcher to analyze how metaphors in Taylor Swift lyrics are not just random, but also tools, intentional tools that are for storytelling and also to emotional connection, and also the uses of the qualitative analysis and conceptual metaphor theory allow us to see how her language reflects both on her personal experience and our human feelings. Okay, so continuing from the previous part, in this second part, I will explain about the data analysis procedures, the focus of analysis, and the expected outcomes of this study. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about the data analysis procedures. Okay, so in this study, the researcher analyzed the lyrics of Taylor Swift selected songs by from a previous mentioned by following the several important steps. So the first step is identifying metaphors. This means that the researcher carefully examined the lyrics to find words or phrases that are figurative or non-literal, expressions that carry deeper meanings beyond their surface. For example, when Taylor says things like, "I'm a mirror ball" or "love's a game," those are not meant to be taken literally. Instead, they represent how she sees herself or her experiences metaphorically. Okay, so that's the first step. The second step is mapping conceptual domains. So in this process, each metaphor is analyzed by identifying two key parts, the source domain and the target domain. So the source domain is the concrete or physical concept, and the target domain is the abstract one. So for example, the metaphor "love is war," the war is the source domain. It means that something we can visualize and understand, and love is the target domain, the abstract experience being explained through the idea of conflict. So similarly, in "the self is a mirror ball," the mirror ball represents the fragile, reflective nature of self-identity. So by connecting these domains, the researcher reveals how Taylor Swift transforms complex emotions into vivid, relatable imagery. Now, okay, so that's the second step. Now the third step is categorizing metaphors. So after identifying and mapping them, the researcher groups the metaphors into conceptual categories. So for instance, love is a journey, love is war, or the self is a fragmented entity. This classification helps to show patterns across different songs, highlighting which metaphors appear most frequently and what kind of emotional or thematic ideas they represent. And the last step is interpreting semantic roles. So in here, the analysis focuses on understanding how each metaphor contributes to meaning, emotion, and narrative within the song. For example, a metaphor might strengthen the emotional tone, help build the story, or even reveal something about Taylor Swift's personal transformation as an artist. Okay, so now let's move on to the focus of analysis. So this study mainly examines the semantic and cognitive functions of metaphors in Taylor Swift's songwriting. In simpler terms, it looks at how the metaphors work not only in language but also in thought, how they help shape ideas, emotions, and identity. And the researcher focused on how metaphors. So first one is to build narrative structure, meaning how they organize the story and flow the lyrics. Second is to convey emotional depth by expressing complex feelings like heartbreak, growth in ways that are touch listeners deeply. And lastly is to reflect self-identity and transformation, to show how Taylor Swift often used metaphors to represent her personal, emotional maturity through her career. So through this focus, the study doesn't just describe what the metaphors are, but also why they matter, how they influence the listener interpretation and emotional experience when hearing her songs. Okay, so finally, let's discuss the expected outcome of the study. So the goal of this research is to show how Taylor Swift used metaphors not only as decoration or poetic style, but as powerful tools for expressing love, heartbreak, and identity. By also to analyze her lyrics, the researcher aims to prove that the metaphors in her songs serve as both conceptual frameworks and also emotional bridge. So to connect her personal stories with universal human experiences. So in other words, metaphors make her lyrics feel like relates at the same time. So to conclude all this part, so this methodology part shows that Taylor Swift's metaphors are not just random or pluralistic, but also structured, meaningful, and deeply uh, tied to how people could understand the feelings through language. So I think that's all from me. Thank you so much.
This section analyzes the metaphorical expression found in selected Taylor Swift song lyric and discuss their semantic implication. The analysis focus on how this metaphor contribute to meaning making, emotional expression, and narrative construction. Four songs were selected from different paths of Swift's discography to provide a balanced view: Love Story, Blank Space, The Archer, and All Too Well. First, metaphor as a cognitive tool in Taylor Swift lyrics. Metaphors in Taylor Swift's songwriting are not merely decorative, they serve as powerful cognitive tools that help translate abstract emotion such as love, heartbreak, and identity into more concrete and relatable imagery. According to conceptual metaphor theory proposed by Lakoff and Johnson, 1980, metaphors allow individuals to understand one conceptual domain in terms of another. This is clearly reflected in Swift's lyrics, where emotional experiences are often mapped onto physical, spatial, or narrative structure. For instance, in the song Love Story, the line, "It's a love story, baby, just say yes," exemplifies the metaphor love is a story or love is a fairy tale. This metaphor does more than just romanticize the relationship. It frames the experience of love within a culturally familiar narrative structure, complete with characters, obstacle, and a desired resolution. By positioning her by positioning herself as Juliet and the lover as Romeo, Swift invokes the timeless tale of forbidden love, but deliberately rewrite the tragic ending, suggesting that personal agency can rewrite fate. The lyric becomes a site of cognitive negotiation between cultural expectation of romance and personal redefinition. The second is recurrent conceptual metaphor in Taylor Swift lyrics. A detailed analysis of selected songs reveals several recurrent conceptual metaphor characteristics of Taylor Swift lyrics. These metaphors function as cognitive frameworks that allow listeners to comprehend and emotionally experience complex feelings more concretely. For example, first, love is a journey. This metaphor frequently appears in Swift's works and represents romantic relationship as dynamic process involving progress, obstacle, and change. In Love Story, the love journey is depicted as a narrative moving from an initial meeting toward an anticipated resolution, displaying optimism and a sense of control over romantic fate. The second is the self is a fractured entity or mirrorball. Songs like Mirrorball and The Archer portray the self as fragile, broken, and fragmented, highlighting duality and internal conflict. This metaphor reflects experience of vulnerability, identity searching, and uncertainty often encountered during personal development. The third is a relationship as a physical battles. This metaphor presents interpersonal relationship as battlegrounds, emphasizing emotional intensity, conflict, and struggle. In All Too Well, 10-minute version, battle metaphors depict the pain of heartbreak and emotional trauma, lending dramatic power and narrative intensity. Next is semantic roles and emotional impact of metaphor. The metaphor in Taylor Swift lyrics do more than enrich linguistic aesthetic. They play a vital role in building thematic meaning and evoking emotional resonance. By mapping abstract concepts onto concrete domains, metaphor enable listeners to feel the depth of emotion that are otherwise hard to articulate directly. For instance, the metaphor love is war in blank space express tension and destructive dynamics in romantic relationship made by cycles of love and betrayal. It used strangeness, the narrative of emotional instability and risk faced by those involved while in also creating swift characteristic ironic distance. The fourth is metaphor and narrative structure. Metaphor also play a central role in shaping the narrative structure of Swift's song. Through metaphor, her lyric not only tell story but also organize emotional experience into coherent frameworks easily followed by listener. For example, All Too Well use rich metaphor to build a complex memory narrative, resembling fragments of past moments and mix emotion into a story full of meaning and feeling. Metaphors such as memory is a place, emotional pain is a physical wound articulate the intensity of trauma and sadness vividly. The narrative shaped by these metaphors create space for a listener to interpret and emotional engage with the lyric based on their own experience, broadening songs' emotional reach. Fifth is cognitive mechanism underlying metaphor use. Within the framework of conceptual metaphor theory, Taylor Swift metaphor use can be understood as a cognitive process involving mapping from a concrete source domain into an abstract target domain. This allowed complex abstraction like love, identity, and emotional conflict to grasp via more tangible everyday experience. Swift appears to use this mechanism consciously or unconsciously to build strong emotional connection with her audience. By employing cultural and universally recognizable metaphors, she opened cognitive access that makes her personal experience more relatable and widely felt. For example, love is a journey implies physical experience of traveling and passage of time to explain relationship dynamic. While the self is a fractured entity, use familiar visual imagery to help listener intuitively understand emotional complexity. The sixth is bridging personal storytelling and cultural models. This analysis confirmed that metaphors in Taylor Swift's lyric not only reflect her personal experience, but also connect this story with broader cultural models. The metaphor used are collective and widely understood within popular culture, allowing listeners from diverse backgrounds to engage emotionally. For example, the narrative of love as a story or journey is a universal pattern long embedded in Western culture. So this metaphor build a bridge between Swift individual experience and large social narrative about love and identity. This metaphor in Swift song serve a medium integrating personal story with social and cultural meaning, enhancing her music universal appeal and relevance to a broad audience. Next is conclusion. In conclusion, Taylor Swift metaphorical language is a dynamic and integral part of her songwriting, serving cognitive, semantic, narrative, and cultural function that depend the expressive impact of her music. This study affirmed the vital role of metaphor in contemporary popular music and its capacity to articulate the intricacies of human experience through language.